Welcome back to the Blackletter podcast. We set out to create an entertaining and exciting podcast about law and business. Blackletter, the name, comes from the Gothic typeset. Over time, Blackletter became the only font that English law books were printed in. It made it harder for kind of the common person to understand what the English law books said. Blackletter came to represent something that was law, that was set in stone, that was sort of old and a well-settled fundamental principle of law. We're here to demystify black-letter law. We're here to demystify things that happen in business and law and where those two meet. And I hope you have fun listening.
Welcome back to another episode of the Blackletter podcast. Thanks for joining me again. And this is our third segment with Ben Landers in our new format. This week, Ben is going to talk about an actual real-world problem in his business, a tactical problem, a strategic problem, whatever it was. And he's going to then tell us how he resolved that problem. And hopefully, kind of like, biblical parables, you'll learn something from that and take from Ben's experience and use it as you will. Ben, thanks for coming back to join us this week on the Blackletter podcast. And I will just, for the audience, to take some of the mystique out of it, you will notice, yes, I'm wearing the same shirt. We are shooting this all on the same day. I'm not running around wearing the same clothes, nor is Ben, but we are splitting this up into 3 segments. That was bothering me a little bit. So I thought I would put that into this.
Tom, but I adopted like the Steve Jobs approach where I have navy blue Corona polos and sky blue. And you're getting one of them no matter what day it is. I don't make any decision. I just take the next one off the hanger.
Oh, that's nice. Even in the winter, I see, because it's right. We're both here in Northern Virginia. It's 20 degrees here this week, and it sucks. Yeah. So, well, Ben, welcome back. So share with us, if you will, this week, because you had a little time to think about it. What's a big problem you had at the company, and how did you come to realize it was a problem, and then how did you resolve that problem?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, we grew the business very rapidly. We've been on the Inc. 5,000 list 9 consecutive times, so we grew very rapidly, which is a great thing. But the challenge that we faced is at some point, as we had grown so rapidly, we had disparate systems. So we had, Salesforce as our CRM, which wasn't connected to our project management software. Our client communication was captured in another portal. So you had this sort of disjointed, on the operations side. The output of that was, we hit some points where our growth sort of started to slow from where we wanted it to be. But sort of more troubling to me was, we would have client attrition or employee attrition, where employees were saying in the exit interview that having to go from one system to another system and the friction to do my job is too much. And so, we noticed like that's a big problem. And I think, again, if you're an entrepreneur that started this business, you don't have any training in organizational design or kind of creating systems. And if you think you're going to go out and just like, we'll call SAP or Oracle or Info, just call them and have them put NetSuite in, that's going to be a massive check. And that's without all the change orders and the 18 months that it takes.
Right. That's $1 million.
It's a serious endeavor. Every entrepreneur is like, why can't there just be one thing that just does everything? It's like, there is, but it costs as much as you've done in revenue the last 4 or 5 years. So think carefully if you want to do that. So the way I addressed it was sort of a 2-parter. One is I started doing competitive analysis, started looking at the larger competitors. How are they structured? You can learn a lot from LinkedIn in terms of the roles and positions that they have. I also started looking at key employees. So, there would be a founder, and then you would start to see, okay, the founder hired this COO or hired this VP of sales. You can kind of look at the timelines of when those happen. And that kind of resulted in me saying, I need to bring in some senior talent. We had grown to a point with almost exclusively our original employees. It's like my director of finance, to this day was employee number 3. But luckily, the financial side of our business, is pretty simple. So she's been able to grow with the curve of the company. But anyway, so I hired a guy who's now our president, but originally he was our head of sales and marketing. And he came from a bigger company. And we had this little operating system, kind of a way that we ran the business, cadence of meetings, how we set goals, how we hold people accountable, that we were using when we started hitting this kind of turbulence. And he came in the first executive meeting that he attended on a Monday.
Mhm.
Immediately the red flag went up that was like, our homemade kind of operating system is not going to work. Because we're sitting here, I'm asking people where they stand with sort of the things that they were working on. And he
Yeah.
says, what problem are we trying to solve here? And I'm like, I'm sort of this was virtual. We were on like a Zoom. I'm like looking at him like, what are you doing here? I'm running this meeting. I'm the CEO, at that time. And so I had a call after the meeting with him and I was like, hey, and he said, I'm coming from a bigger organization. And I just want us to win. And
Right.
you guys go into the how without clearly defining the what. Like, what's the problem? And then how are we going to solve it? I don't think you guys take enough time to figure out the root cause. And that's why a lot of these things aren't happening. And then even when they happen, why the problems are persistent. And I'll only say to myself that I'm pretty good at, having enough, humility to say, instead of arguing with them, it's like,
Right.
talk to me about that, more about that. We adopted then EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system. There are a lot of different sort of these ways to kind of run your business, meeting cadence, and how to do the goal setting and holding people accountable. But we, the executive team, kind of looked at a couple different options, and we all sort of agreed that sort of a slightly modified version of that would better serve this now bigger organization. That was number one. And so we started using that. And that EOS really involves in the issue processing, like, okay, customers are canceling. Why are they canceling? Well, because they're not getting their reports on time. Why aren't they getting their reports on time? Like, really drilling into like,
Right.
what is the problem? And then once you have that list of problems, then you're sort of compartmentalizing, what do we have to tackle this quarter versus what can we set? We're not going to forget about it, but it's going to go in this holding pen to address next quarter or whatever. So it just gives you a way, if you have 50 million issues coming at you, it gives you this framework to kind of compartmentalize them. It kind of de-stresses the organization. You get the business running with this cadence where things suddenly start to become much more predictable. And then second is he, in a really odd twist, had a systems background. And so we then also looked at all these disparate systems and sort of built a 2-year roadmap of how are we going to start to sort of stitching things together without the multi-million dollar, price tag.
Gotcha.
And that one hire, I mean, again, he knows I've thrown him so many bones in this regard. Mike, I hope you're listening to this and I hope you're smiling. He improved sort of the way we manage the business, sort of the operating system, how we address any kind of root cause problems, how we set goals and hold people accountable.
How did you, one, realize you need that hire? And two, how did you find that person? Because that's another big challenge.
The knowing that I needed to hire someone with more experience came when I started doing the analysis of competitors and sort of like, again, there are companies that were twice our size, where some of the original people were still there in key roles, but it was clear that they brought in, talent from the outside at various points. And the challenge, of course, is that talent is expensive. So I was paying this person more than I made, at least in salary. And that can be challenging to go like, man, like this is a lot. And it comes out of, the way I always worked is I get a reasonable salary. And then I was getting any additional as distributions, shareholder distributions.
Right.
Sure. To forego distributions, is the same amount for like a year or two while you invest back in the business, that's tough because you think to yourself, man, maybe I don't need to grow. Maybe I'll just keep it this size. And, but you have to kind of think long term. So the first was the competitive analysis, what led me to realize like I need to add someone. I can't do it all myself. But when I brought him in, he was the vice president of sales and marketing. I actually hired another person separately to be the COO. That didn't work out. I mean, we learned a lot. I think, it was an experience, but I think from a culture fit perspective, It was not the right fit for us. But what had happened was, observing Mike in this vice president of sales and marketing role, as I was having issues on the operations side, I kind of turned to him and I said, I know this isn't what you originally signed on for, but I'm a pretty good judge of like people's talents. You would be amazing at this. Do you have the bandwidth to do it? Do you want to do it? Can we come up with an arrangement to move you into that role? And so him and I had worked that all out. And I had recruited him, the vice president of sales marketing. That was like through kind of family and friends. I had met him at a wedding where he was, married to my wife's, cousin. And I'm at a wedding and I'm talking to him and I said, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I run X sales for Infor, which is a huge company. And I was younger in my career. I'm like asking him all these questions and just listening to him talk. I'm going, okay, like this guy's a big cheese. I'm a little business owner. And so, a year or something later, I reached out to him and I said, hey, we're trying to do this with sales and we're kind of hitting some turbulence. Can I bend your ear on something? And it's like a Saturday. He's like, yeah, call me. And then through that, he's like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And I'm like, and again, and then a year went by and I was waiting on a train in New York and I said, I just sent him a note and I said, when are you going to retire from Infor and come work for Blue Corona? And he just sent back like question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. And then anyway, that led to a call where I basically pitched him. I said, this is what we have. And he earlier in his career had worked for a family-owned software company that was grown and then bought by Infor. So he had kind of worked for a Blue Corona-esque company and watched grow when he was early in his career. It was like, imagine if you could go back in time to that company that was grown and sold, where knowing what you know now, that's the opportunity.
You had a problem-solving problem, and you solved your problem through a hire, and then that hire kind of jumped in and solved that problem. That's the real-world kind of thing that I guess that really helped lift your business. Anecdotally, I found kind of the same thing in what we do, and I've heard from other business owners that it sounds like almost everything from the kind of the 3 takeaways last week to how you started your company, all of it seems to come from inside the mind. A lot of it's self-realizing and mindset type of things. That's just what I'm summarizing about Ben Landers and success. And it just seems like you've been really successful. Thanks for spending time with us. Appreciate you jumping out. And what I'd be really excited to hear about is catch up where Blue Corona is in a few months or 6, 8, 10 months as exciting things happen with you guys, which I'm sure they are because you guys are still in a growth mindset.
That's all for today's episode of Blackletter. Thanks again for listening. Join us next time when we talk about more Blackletter issues in creative ways. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and check out our website at blackletterstudios.com.